I never thought the place I loved most would become the battlefield where I almost lost everything. My name is Tom Reynolds, and this is the full story, every heartbeat, every sleepless night, every moment I thought the world was ending for my family. It was supposed to be our forever home. 240 acres of rolling Texas hill country, a weathered white house with a tin roof that sang when the rain came, a wide front porch that wrapped around like welcoming arms, and enough distance from the nearest subdivision that you couldn't hear a neighbor's dog bark unless the wind shifted just right. We moved in the spring of 2022. I remember the exact day because Lily, our little girl, 6 years old then, found a bluebonnet taller than her knee and declared it proof that God wanted us here. Sarah and I had spent 23 years in the suburbs outside Fort Worth. Cul-de-sacs, streetlights, HOA fines if your grass grew half an inch too tall. I'd been a project superintendent, gone before sunrise, home after dark. Sarah taught 3rd grade and came home exhausted from fluorescent lights and standardized tests. Ben was 10, Lily 6, and we were all tired of living like hamsters on a wheel. So when the old McAllister place came up for sale, inherited by cousins in California who wanted nothing to do with cattle or cedar posts, we sold everything we could, cashed in my 401k, and bought it outright. No mortgage, no bank owning a piece of us. Just land, sky, and the promise of quiet. Those first months were pure joy. I'd wake at 4:30, start the coffee in the same dented percolator my granddad used, and step out barefoot onto the porch while the stars still hung low. The air smelled like cedar and cool dirt, the kind of smell that makes a man feel clean inside. Ben and I built a tree fort in the big live oak by the north fence. He hammered most of the nails crooked, but I never corrected a single one. Lily learned to ride Rosie, our old bay mare, while Sarah walked beside her, one hand on the reins, the other on Lily's leg, whispering, "Easy girl, easy now," to both horse and child. We ate supper on that porch every night the weather allowed. Sarah's fried chicken, fresh peas from the garden, cornbread still steaming. Afterward the kids chased lightning bugs while Sarah and I sat in the rockers, her head on my shoulder, watching the horizon turn gold, then orange, then the deep velvet blue that only comes in the country. I think, this is it. This is what men used to mean when they said they were free. Then the first letter came. Plain white envelope, no return address, shoved so hard into the mailbox the metal door was bent. Sarah found it while bringing in the newspaper. She carried it up the steps like it might explode. I slid it open expecting an electric co-op flyer. Instead, violation of Ridgeview Estates Covenants, Section 7B. Remove all livestock and unauthorized agricultural structures within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in daily fines and possible lien. I laughed at first. Ridgeview Estates was the gated golf course community 8 miles east, the one with the stone entrance and the fountain that cost more to run than my first truck. I walked the fence line with the survey map in hand. Our western boundary was a good 3 miles past their last streetlight. No shared roads, no easements, nothing. We weren't in their HOA, never had been, never would be. We threw the letter in a drawer and forgot it. 3 days later another arrived. Then another. Then they started taping bright pink notices to the gate posts, the barn door, even the front porch railing while we were in town getting feed. Final notice in bold red letters. Fines now exceed $4,200. One morning, I found a stack of 30 identical sheets fluttering like prayer flags across the cattle guard. I called the number at the bottom. A woman with a smoker's rasp answered, "Ridgeview Compliance, this is Brenda." "Ma'am, there's been a mistake. Reynolds Ranch, County Road 407. We're not in your association." "Sir, your access road intersects with Ridgeview property. That triggers automatic inclusion." "No ma'am, it does not. That road was deeded in 1948. I have the plat right here." Long pause. "We'll send an inspector." Click. The inspector showed up 2 days later. Short, round man in khakis and a polo shirt 2 sizes too tight, silver camera swinging around his neck. He parked his white SUV in my driveway like he owned the place and started photographing the barn, the chicken coop, my kid's swing set. I walked out in my work boots. "Can I help you?" "Compliance check. You're on private property. Leave." He smirked, snapped a picture of my license plate, and waddled off muttering, "You'll be hearing from the board." That night, I moved the Remington 870 from the gun safe to the coat closet by the front door. Sarah saw me do it. She didn't say a word, just touched my arm and nodded. We both knew something poisonous had crawled into our garden. The harassment turned creative. Gates left open so cattle wandered onto the county road. A water trough drained overnight. Someone had loosened the valve and let 2,000 gallons soak into the dirt. Fresh tractor tires slashed. One evening Ben came running from the barn crying because someone had taken his rope swing and cut it into pieces. Then came the sign. I was coming back from the feed store when I saw it hammered into the front yard like a grave marker. For sale in bold black letters. Beneath it, someone had used a Sharpie to scrawl pending Ridgeview seizure. Sarah stood on the porch holding Lily, both of them pale. Ben kicked the dirt and asked the question no 10-year-old should ever have to ask. "Dad, are we losing our house?" I yanked that sign out of the ground so hard the post snapped. "Not while I'm breathing," I told them. That same week I got a text from a block number. "You have been warned." Nothing else. 6 days of total silence followed. No letters, no pink papers, no strange vehicles. At first Sarah thought they'd given up. She started baking again, pecan pies, banana bread, anything to fill the house with normal smells. But I walked the fence every evening with Rusty, our blue heeler, and he never relaxed. Ears up, hackles half raised, staring at the tree line like he saw ghosts I couldn't. I knew the quiet wasn't peace. It was pressure building. I called Steve Morales, my squad leader from Ramadi days. We hadn't spoken in 8 years, but when I told him I needed perimeter gear, he didn't ask questions. 2 days later, a small box arrived overnight from a nondescript address in Virginia. Inside, for military-grade thermal motion sensors, the kind we use to guard forward operating bases. Steve's note was 2 lines: mount high, trust but verify. I spent an afternoon in the live oaks wiring them above eye level, linking them to a receiver inside the house. When I finished, Sarah watched from the kitchen window. She didn't smile, but she gave me a look that said, whatever comes, we face it together. The 6th night of silence, the receiver beeped 3 times. Movement, north fence, human silhouette. I was already awake. Had been for hours. Sarah sat up in bed the same moment I did. Tom, stay with the kids. Rusty was at the bedroom door, growling low. I slipped down the hall in sock feet, took the shotgun from the closet, racked a shell as quiet as I could. The house was dark except for the glow of the receiver. One heat signature moving slow along the back fence, another near the rear porch. Then the softest click. Someone testing the back door handle. I moved into the shadows beside the fridge. Rusty's nails clicked on hardwood as he took position beside me. Outside, a whispered voice. Quit screwing with it, just break the damn window. Glass exploded inward. A black-gloved hand reached through, unlocked the door, and 2 figures stepped inside. Hoodies, face coverings, one carrying a crowbar like a baseball bat. The porch light caught the second man's jaw as his mask slipped, just for a heartbeat, but it was enough. Mark Hargrove, HOA vice president, the man who'd been sending the letters, the one who'd smirked at me from the compliance SUV. He raised the crowbar and took a step toward the hallway where my children slept. I stepped out of the dark. Drop it. He spun. The crowbar started down. I pulled the trigger. The 12-gauge roar filled the house like a cannon. Mark flew sideways into the kitchen island, shoulder exploding red. The crowbar clattered across the tile. His partner bolted out the broken door and disappeared into the night. Mark lay on my floor, blood pooling, but he looked up at me and smiled through red teeth. Took you long enough, Reynolds. You just handed us everything. Sirens. Immediate. Impossibly fast. Red and blue lights painted the walls before the echo of the shotgun faded. 3 sheriff's cruisers, lights flashing, tires spitting gravel. Deputies poured onto the porch with rifles up. Weapon down. On the ground. I set the shotgun on the floor, hands high. Sarah was in the hallway clutching the kids, sobbing. Ben's face was white, Lily buried in her nightgown. Deputies cuffed me while Mark groaned theatrically for the body cams. He shot me no warning, just started blasting. They dragged me past my family. Ben reached for me. Dad, a deputy blocked him. The last thing I saw before the cruiser door shut was Sarah standing barefoot in the gravel, kids wrapped around her legs, porch light making a halo of her hair while she screamed my name. At the station, they didn't book me right away. Just put me in an interrogation room that smelled like old coffee and bleach. An hour later, Sheriff Harlan Brooks walked in alone, hat in hand. He was 60 if he was a day, face like a topographic map of hard years. Tom, you hit. No, sir. Good. He slid a tablet across the table. Your camera's auto-upload to the cloud. Tech boys pulled it the minute y'all rolled in. He pressed play. There was Mark testing the door handle. There was the window shattering. There was the crowbar raised toward my children's rooms. There was my warning, the flash, Mark collapsing. Clear as Sunday morning. Harlan exhaled slow. Texas law's real clear about a man's home at 2 a.m. You're free to go. But Tom, somebody wanted this to look like you snapped. That call about shots fired hit dispatch before the shot was fired. Somebody was listening, waiting, hoping. He handed me my belt and keys. Go home to your family. And start keeping a war journal. Because whatever this is, it just went way past petty HOA bullshit. 2 days later, the civil lawsuit arrived. Assault with a deadly weapon, intentional infliction of emotional distress, $2.4 million demanded. Mark signed it from his hospital bed with his good arm. 4 days after that, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up at dawn. Harlan got out carrying an official envelope, face grim. I'm real sorry, Tom. Inside, emergency petition for removal of minor children, filed by Child Protective Services. Allegations, exposure to firearms, domestic violence, unstable home environment, possible neglect. Sarah read it on the porch, and her knees gave out. She sat down hard on the steps, arms around herself like she might fly apart. Lily started crying because Mommy was crying. Ben stood in front of them both like a tiny bodyguard, fists clenched, staring at the cruiser like he could make it disappear if he hated it hard enough. I looked at Harlan. This is insane. I know it, son. But a judge has to hear it within 72 hours. Somebody's pulling every string in Austin. We hired Alan Whitaker full-time, sold the camper, the extra tractor, drained the savings. He turned our kitchen into a war room. Stacks of character letters from teachers, pediatricians, our pastor, neighbors who'd never even met Mark Hargrove. School records, medical files, Sunday school attendance, anything to prove we were a normal, loving family. The hearing was on a Tuesday that felt like Judgment Day. The courtroom smelled like lemon polish and fear. The CPS caseworker laid out her evidence. Photos of me carrying a rifle across the yard, cropped to look threatening. Anonymous complaints about yelling and guns. A grainy still of me checking the fence at night with a sidearm. She used the phrase, best interest of the children, like a club. Then Alan stood up. Quiet, calm, the way a good man gets right before he drops the hammer. Your Honor, the danger in that home didn't come from inside it. He played the footage, full length, unedited. The room went dead silent. You could hear the air conditioning click on. When it ended, Alan laid the final card. Every CPS complaint traced to a single IP address registered to Mark Hargrove's home internet. The judge, a gray-haired woman who'd clearly seen too many real tragedies to waste time on fake ones, didn't even recess. Petition denied. Restraining order issued against Mr. Hargrove and Associates. Case closed. We walked out into sunlight that felt like mercy. Sarah cried so hard she couldn't walk straight. I held her up while the kids clung to our legs. Across the street, a black SUV sat idling, windows tinted dark as sin. Someone inside watched us for a long minute, then pulled away slow. That night, I found the fence cut clean with bolt cutters and fresh ATV tracks leading to the old storage shed. Inside, on a shelf under a tarp, was a black envelope and a USB drive. A single sheet of paper. He failed to follow instructions. I waited until the kids were asleep, then plugged it into my laptop. What I saw turned my blood to ice water. Bank records. Emails. Contracts. Mark Hargrove had been paid $180,000 in installments by Apex Development Corporation, a subsidiary of a Dallas-based infrastructure giant. The money was labeled consulting fees, forced vacancy initiative, Reynolds parcel. There were maps of the proposed Summit Valley Tollway extension, a 4-lane monster that needed a 2-mile corridor nobody knew about yet. Our ranch sat dead center. Apex had already reported to the Texas DOT and their Wall Street investors that the corridor was 100% acquired. They'd pocketed federal funds, sold bonds, locked contracts. All that stood between them and billions was one stubborn rancher who wouldn't sell. The final page was a calendar. Phase 1 completion deadline. 28 days from the date on the file. Our parcel was highlighted in red with the words, "Annoying compliant, escalate." They weren't trying to annoy us into leaving anymore. They were racing a clock measured in hundreds of millions of dollars. And people that high up don't lose money. They remove obstacles. I forwarded everything to Alan and to the FBI's public corruption inbox in Dallas. Then I sat on the porch until dawn with the shotgun across my knees, listening to a quiet that no longer felt like peace. It felt like the moment before a sniper takes the shot. They came at first light. I smelled smoke before I saw it, sharp, chemical, not a brush pile. For separate fires, set with accelerant in a perfect arc that the wind would push straight toward the house. Then the low rumble of heavy diesel. AD. 8 bulldozer crested the ridge, blade lowered, fake Apex logo magnet stuck to the door, rolling straight for our bedroom wall. Sarah was already moving. Kids. Cellar. Now, we built the storm shelter years ago after a tornado came close. 12 feet of concrete and steel buried under the backyard. I carried Lily. Sarah dragged Ben by the hand. Behind us, the fires roared upward, orange against the pale dawn. The bulldozer's engine screamed as it hit the front steps. I slammed the steel hatch and spun the wheel. Inside it was cool, dark, smelled like earth and canned peaches. The kids huddled on the bench, eyes huge. Sarah held them so tight, I heard Ben's breath hitch. Above us, the world ended. We felt the vibrations as the dozer blade chewed through the porch, the groan of beams giving way, the crash as the second story folded into the first. Dust sifted through the vents. Lily whimpered. Ben covered his ears. Sarah prayed out loud, words I'd never heard from her before, raw and fierce. 10 minutes. 15. Then silence, not peace, but the silence that follows destruction. I cracked the hatch. Smoke rolled thick and gray. The house was a broken skeleton, roof caved, walls yawning open. The bulldozer sat idle 20 yards away, blade dripping splinters. And coming up the drive, sirens howling, was half the federal government. Black SUVs, marked and unmarked. FBI raid vans. Texas Rangers. Sheriff's units. Even a fire truck. They poured out like hornets. 3 men in fire-resistant coveralls were face down in the dirt before I climbed fully out of the cellar, hands cuffed behind them. One was still yelling. They said the house would be empty. Sheriff Harlan walked over, soot on his hat brim. You hurt. We were alive. That was enough. An agent in a windbreaker handed me a tablet. Live feed from Dallas. A blonde woman in a Navy suit being walked out of a high-rise in handcuffs. Victoria Lang, Executive VP of Apex Development. They'd caught her in the server room at 5:12 a.m., shredding documents and smashing hard drives. The money trail from the USB led straight to her personal accounts, Cayman Islands, wire transfers, the works. She'd faked the acquisition of our land, pocketed the federal disbursement, then hired private contractors to resolve the problem when we wouldn't leave. Mark Hargrove was arrested an hour later in a Waco motel with a go bag, $30,000 cash, and a one-way ticket to Belize. The charges came fast: conspiracy to commit murder, arson, fraud, racketeering, half a dozen federal counts that don't come with parole. Victoria lawyered up with the best firm in Texas. Didn't help. The evidence was ironclad. It took 14 months to rebuild the house. Bigger, stronger, paid for with the settlement Apex wired the day their stock dropped 42%. Neighbors we barely knew showed up with hammers and casseroles. The church youth group reshingled the barn for free. Ben and Lily picked out the new porch swing themselves, bright blue, hangs from the same oak beam that survived the collapse. One October evening in 2024, I sat on that new porch with Sarah, coffee steaming in the cool air. The kids chased each other through the yard, laughter echoing off the barn like church bells. The sun dropped behind the hills in a blaze of orange and pink, Same as it had the day we first drove down this road. Sarah rested her head on my shoulder. Think it's really over this time? I looked across our land, fences mended, cattle grazing, bluebonnets already pushing up for spring. It's over, I said. And we're still here. That's what matters. She squeezed my hand. The kids ran up breathless, begging for one more push on the swing before dark. I stood up, lifted Lily onto my hip, and felt the weight of her, solid, real, alive. Ben grabbed my free hand. As we walked toward the oak, the last light caught the new brass plaque I'd bolted to the porch post. Simple words, etched deep. This land is not for sale. This family is not for breaking. Mess with us again, and you'll learn the difference. Now I want to hear from you. In the comments, tell me honest. When someone comes for your home, your children, your life, how far is too far to protect them? Was I right to pull that trigger? Would you have done the same, or waited for the system to save you? Drop your thoughts below. This is America, land of the free, home of the brave, but only if we're willing to stand up when it counts. Let's talk.